Okay, right, let's just make sure that I've got audio when I might need it. Right, hello everyone. That was, if you were with me in the previous session, you probably didn't even have time to leave your seat. I didn't actually make it anywhere, but thankfully I've got some water. Thanks for your company in the last session. If you've just joined me for this session, then I hope you're having a good day. You might have been to some other sessions. I hope you've had a good conference day if you've been doing this all day, or if you've just joined at the end of a busy school day, welcome as well. My name's Rachel Hawkes. I'm currently seconded from my school to work as co-director at NCELP, which is the National Centre for Excellence for Language Pedagogy. In this presentation, I'm going to talk about curriculum design. And I just because I always forget to do thank yous if I leave them till later in the session. Before we get underway, I just want to thank all of the NCELP team for everything that they've put into the project to date. We've been working on this for nearly 2 years now. And in particular, with reference to curriculum planning, which is the focus of this session, I want to mention Nick Avery and Natalie Finlayson, who are resource developers and scheme of work holders for Spanish and French. And obviously, thanks to Professor Emma Marsden, who is director of NCELP. And even if there is even more importantly, all of the lead and hub school teachers who are currently teaching these schemes of work in their schools. Thank you to all of you. You're giving us phenomenally important feedback and pushing us hard with questions as well that we really do appreciate, and that just helps us to keep our game high. So I'm going to start with this quote, which I absolutely love. So a teacher that's currently using the NCELP scheme of work said this: NCELP is what language is about. I mean, that's just nice, isn't it? It's a nice soundbite. Let's not unpack it. Let's just enjoy it for what it is and get on with the session. Okay, so whether we're planning an individual lesson, a sequence of lessons, or a whole year's scheme of work, or a whole Key Stage 3 scheme of work, you know, we're not going to doubt the fact that excellent teaching comes from excellent planning. You might wing a fantastic lesson off the cuff once, twice, or whatever, but it's not going to build up to something in the long term unless there is some excellent planning underpinning it. And in this project, I have done more with planning than I have ever done. I've been pushed further and farther and harder on the whole issue of planning than I ever would have thought imaginable before I started it. So in this session, we're going to focus on the planning principles for a whole scheme of work. So whether you're working at primary or secondary level, I would say that the principles are absolutely the same. The examples that I'm drawing on are informed by research and also by practice. And they're taken from the schemes of work, and the schemes of work are freely available, and I'm going to show you the links. And this presentation, along with my presentation from the previous session, will both be on the NCELP website. So the recording, if you want to hear this session again, that will be available to you from the link that you subscribe to, the link that you got emailed for a month. But the actual raw resources and the raw slides, if you wanted to share those with colleagues, they will be available forever on the NCELP portal. And I'll show you the link to that at the end. Okay, so starting off with absolute basics. Teaching is carefully planned in order, not just because it's nice to have stuff on a plan, but in order to compel thinking, to make it absolute maximum and optimum use of time to compel students to think, because thinking drives learning, and because success in learning is motivational. If we cause students to think, they will learn. If they learn, they will feel successful, and that is motivational, and that overall you know, very neatly and easily sorts out the whole of our lives in terms of being a language teacher. So in this session, we're going to run it as follows. We're going to start with the principles and key features of a strong scheme of work that apply to any new language. We're going to do a walkthrough of a specific scheme of work document, and then we're going to switch to showing some resources. I'm actually going to show a full resource in this session, so from start to finish, all of the different activities, because I wasn't able to do that in the previous session. And finally, I'm going to suggest some steps and signpost links to loads of other resources that you might be interested to look at and use in your teaching. Another quote, yeah, a teacher described this approach as empowering. And I think that that's a really good term, because it certainly isn't easy and, you know, a walk in the park, but it is meaty and it is empowering, and it's empowering for students, which is what we need it to be empowering for. Okay, so before I start, it might be helpful to just spend a moment thinking about what a successful scheme of work looks like for you. We haven't got lots and lots of time, and it's not really a great forum for taking comments. I think there are quite a few people in this session, but if we start with you thinking in your own minds right now, what is a successful scheme of work? What does it need to do for you so that you can use it? But what does it also need to deliver for your learners if you're going to use it as the planning tool for your lessons? If the scheme of work is the vehicle that gets you and your learners from A to B, what will it have in it? And maybe write down very quickly, if you've got a post-it note, the top three things that you would look for in a scheme of work, and think about whether your current schemes of work do that for you. And as you're doing it, I haven't got long, so I'm going to start very soon, just saying what I had on my post-it note. And in the session, I hope then to demonstrate that the NCELP schemes of work have these features. So this is number one, logically sequenced, and that means are things in the right order. Not that there is one right order that we can all go away and buy from off the shelf. What is the right order? But are they internally coherent and logical? If you've decided to start with this, do you then go on and practice that? Or do you do them the other way around? There are relatively few absolute givens in a scheme of work. There are some things that suggest themselves as places you might start, but it's more about making sure that once you're planning it, it's internally logically sequenced, and that you feel happy about defending that to anyone that might ask you. Is it detailed enough? So is it down to word level? If it is, you can start doing some of that revisiting that I was mentioning in the last session, because if on your scheme of work in week 3, term 1, you've laid out which words you are teaching, you can also grab those words and copy them into a column for 3 weeks later for a teacher to realize that they need to revisit those words. So if you are planning at word level and putting those words down in your scheme of work, you can then start organizing yourself into a revisiting cycle. And I've put down to word level, but also down to SSC level, flagging the sound symbol correspondence that you're focusing on that week. Is it systematically planned to regularly revisit these things? So I talked quite a bit about vocabulary revisiting, but are your phonics revisited? Because you won't just teach those once. You know, if you're concentrating on the sound in French one week, you're not just going to leave that one for the rest of their Key Stage 3. How many more times will it come back before the end? So planning your revisiting of phonics, planning your revisiting of vocabulary, and planning your revisiting of grammar features as well, because over time you might have started off doing the present tense and done the I and the he, she forms. You might then have done the I and the you. You might then have done the he, she, and the they. and that will be all present tense, but at some point you'll be able to bring together some more of those persons, and knowing when you have done all of that revisiting is going to be important to you, so that you know how much coverage of each feature you've had. Does your scheme of work include assessment opportunities? I'm not sure I know of a school scheme of work in this country that doesn't, but is it the right balance? You know, if you spend 3 weeks doing the assessments and you've spent the previous 3 weeks getting them ready to do those assessments, then I'm not sure what the teaching has been for, because it's so far away that it won't necessarily be having much of an impact on what they can do. It would be good, wouldn't it, to teach, assess pretty much without having sort of 3 weeks of revision before we get to the assessment. I think we should be doing our teach, revisit in much more of a spaced way as we go through, rather than teach, and then do revision and then do assessment. So thinking about the cycling, the staging of all of that. And, you know, just a nod to Ofsted, supports teaching. A scheme of work needs to demonstrate that it supports teaching, that equips learners to remember more, know more, and do more. I think you can really clearly demonstrate that you are planning your learning for students to remember more if you are really able to show when you are revisiting everything. Teach, revisit, revisit, revisit. It would be really normal, wouldn't it, to want to know that question, to say, okay, when do they meet this? And then when do they meet it again? And when do they meet it again? So, okay, so that was what informed us at the beginning. And what I said on the opening slides, there are some general things that NCELP schemes of work set out to do. And so these are things that have guided us from the beginning, and caused us some sleepless nights and what have you along the way. But clear sequencing and integration of the different strands of pedagogy. So pointing out what grammar, when, and integrating it with the vocabulary and with the phonics, noticing when it gets revisited. It does mean that the topics take a back seat. The topics take a back seat because you can't have two masters in a scheme of work. You can't have grammar features driving it and the sequence of grammar driving it, and have recognizable topics right from the beginning, because the things just don't match. You find that you're trying to put vocabulary onto that week that has no place being there, because it's not even in the top 5,000 words. And if we imagine that students would be doing massively well to arrive at top end of GCSE with 2,000 words in their vocabulary, then we've got to wonder what we're doing teaching them words that lie outside the top 5,000 words. So, you know, this is not that one word, you could find one word for me and say, oh, I really want to teach them that, and I might say that's fine. There are always going to be exceptional words that are just important, but most useful words are the most used words. It's just a no-brainer. It's just a tautology almost. Okay, they need to be sufficiently detailed so that people can plan from them. That kind of goes without saying. And what we decided as NCELP was that we had to provide the resourcing to go with these that would enable somebody, a teacher, to deliver a Key Stage 3 scheme of work that was ticking all the boxes and in line with all of the recommendations of the pedagogy review, without giving themselves an excessive teacher workload. It doesn't mean that you just pick them up off the shelf and use them, but you use them as your starting point, because to do all of the things that I've just described, such as picking your individual pieces of vocabulary for frequency, recycling them every 3 weeks, every 9 weeks, etc., that is a very, very, very laborious and intense thing to be doing. And, you know, so that's why NCELP set out to produce resources that go with the scheme of work. As for the design features, the broad format of the scheme of work is the same across the 3 languages. So it's, yes, we have at the moment, if you wanted to download them, and if you Googled scheme of work in the resource portal, you'd be able to find Year 7 full scheme of work for French, for German, and for Spanish. And you'd be able to find the same for Year 8, although we are still issuing updated versions of the Year 8 scheme of work because we are still resourcing it, teaching it, taking feedback from teachers. So it does at the moment still need downloading fairly regularly. There's a context column. So although I said they're driven by grammar, there is also a context given in the column which seeks to give you a broad idea of the purpose of the language in any one week. So, for example, on the Year 8 German scheme of work, there's a week entitled Comparing People and Places Now and Then, and that's the broad context for that. It is based on, the schemes of work are based on 2 lessons per week. This is important stuff for me to tell you because, when you're reflecting in your minds, well, could that fit? What would we have to do in order to change it for the model that we have? We're assuming 2 lessons per week are taught at Key Stage 3. It's not always the case. We know that, but that is the recommendation in the pedagogy review, that is the time allocation that is given over in the curriculum to teaching languages. So that's why we've based our scheme of work on that. We assume a 36 teaching weeks, that should have an S on, plus 2 assessment weeks, making a total of 38 weeks. There are actually 39 teaching weeks officially in a year, but at either end, they're often partial weeks. And just to account for that, we haven't laid those down either end as full teaching weeks. There's a notes column, and that gives explanations of the language that's been chosen, the ideas for teaching it, and the accompanying resources that come with the scheme of work are 2 lessons. They're released as one PowerPoint, but they're very clearly divided into 2 separate lessons, planned as 50 to 60-minute lessons, where any activity that goes beyond 50 minutes is described as optional. And this is the same approach Year 7, Year 8. There is one scheme of work for all students. However, within lessons, a lot of the tasks have suggestions under the slides for how the tasks are differentiated. Sometimes there are completely different slides, so completely different tasks, versions of the task. Sometimes it's about levels of support, sometimes it's about outcome. But there are indications of where we suggest they might be differentiated if we think they should be or could be or might be. We're going to look at the individual strands a bit more, starting with the grammar strand. Okay, so let's walk through the document. Obviously, I did debate whether to go out of a presentation and then just share the raw scheme of work document with you, but I felt it was going to be a bit messy and it would be clearer for you to see it this way. So this is an Excel document. When you download it, you'll see that at the bottom it's got several tabs. And these are the tabs we're going to look at in detail. So the grammar tracking tab is a week by week overview of the grammar features that are covered. And I'm going to show that now. So this is half term's worth. It's the first half term of Year 8 for Spanish. And just so that we can get our heads around the features, the new grammar that's being introduced, so that's never been seen before, are in bold type. Oh, actually, this isn't Spanish. This is the German scheme of work. I do apologize. I thought I was going to do the Spanish one, but I clearly changed my mind. This is the first time revisiting. So this means that because this is the first half term of Year 8, we have to assume that they met mögen, ich mag, du magst in Year 7, because we can't see it elsewhere above us. And it's in normal type. So we know that we're revisiting this for the first time. So they've met it once before, and now we're seeing it again. Any second and subsequent revisits of grammar features are in italics, and that's as sophisticated or as detailed as we can go with the sort of font types before it just gets unwieldy and complex. So new in bold, first revisiting in normal type, and then italics for second and subsequent revisits. This column shows you which tense is mainly in use in play in the lesson. This column gives you the learning context, so that's as close as you get to a topic. But you'll see there are things that begin to make you feel you're in a comfortable-ish topic arena, and that's because the more vocabulary students learn, this is now going into year 8, the more things begin to bunch together and can cohere into topic areas or things that look like topics. We have extended text exploitation weeks as well, and those are in orange type. So here you can see that we look at a poem by Brecht called Vergnügungen, and that's in week 5 of term 1. When there is a consolidation week, so it says consolidation as the first word in that cell, that is revising vocabulary from year 7 and grammar features from either year 7 or previously in year 8. So we have in this year, we have 6 consolidation weeks, and all of the vocabulary taught in year 7 is revisited again in year 8, because our vocabulary revisiting cycle goes, you learn it, then you revise it within a month, so that's after 3 weeks, then you revise it within a term, which is like within the 9 weeks, and then you revise it within the year, which is during year 8, you revise all of your 7 words. And during year 9, we will be revising all of your 7 words and all of your 8 words as well. Okay. So this tab here, the scheme of work tab, is the scary one, I guess, when you look at it the first time. It's got the detailed word by word planning with the grammar, with the vocab, with the phonics, which we call sounds of the language in year 8, and with the lesson overview. So I'm just going to show you how this is laid out. We have the grammar here. We have the systematic revisiting of vocabulary. So you've got 3 columns for vocabulary. Here you have the new words that are being introduced that week. Here you have the first set of words that are being revisited. These were taught 3 weeks ago, and here you have the words that were taught 9 weeks ago. And when the person writes the lesson, produces the lesson that goes with this part of the scheme of work, they take all of those words on board and integrate them and weave them in as much as they can to all of the different activities. So we might have some bolt-on individual vocabulary tasks like I was describing to you, but in addition to that, we will be trying to weave the vocabulary through the lesson as well, so that through that week, those words are touched, hit upon, encountered by students as many times as possible. The sounds of the language, in this particular week, we're doing that very tricky pairing of I and E in German. So we are revisiting previously taught SSC, but there are some new ones. So particularly in French, for example, new ones are being introduced during the first part of year 8, as well as year 7, because there are just more of those sounds in French. And one of the really important things about the planning that we've done is that we're realizing just how different those languages are. Everyone's said, we've always said for ages, well, you know, you can teach Spanish phonics in half an hour, but, you know, French, it will take you way longer. But we didn't know how much longer until we actually did this level of planning, week by week, plotting it out. You can see that you're going halfway through year 8 before you've taught all of the sounds, whereas in German and Spanish, we've revised them 2 or 3 times already. That's one of the reasons why we've added an extra stage, an extra focus into year 8 German, which is a focus on common word patterns, so that every 2 weeks there'll be something on this that falls into this theme. So it could be something like here, for example, it's the nominalization of verbs. So you have schwimmen, which is a verb, but it can also be a noun with a capital letter and a das gender that's not always used and often left out, but doing that to any single verb will make it into a noun. So that's an important pattern for them to realize, because it's also quite an easy one for them to get on with using. But it might be something that's a German English pattern. So that was a German pattern, but a German English pattern would be, for example, how the English C is often a German K. And there are lots and lots of cognates that will help you practice that and see that in action. So the context and purpose is saying what we think about things for this particular week. And then on the right hand side, you can see the notes planning. And this is a detailed planning for each of the 2 lessons so that you can see what's happening in lesson 1. You can see what's then happening in lesson 2 to the right hand side. Okay, so in terms of grammar, what we're aiming for is parity across the 3 languages, but we are also driven by language specific characteristics. So we know if you teach 2 or 3 languages, you know that there are things that are just more difficult in one language than the other, and either take longer to teach or need to be delayed until a bit longer, until a bit later in the learning process. In most weeks, when you teach a new grammar feature, it's not going to be the whole paradigm, it's going to be part of the paradigm, with maybe a pair of forms being contrasted. Could be 2 persons of the verb, or it could be 2 different spelling patterns following a preposition. So for example, in French, the fact that it's either that a followed by the definite article either becomes au or à la, that would be focused on, and not even the plural initially, it would be focused, you'd be focusing on those 2 forms in the singular, the au and the à la. So that's what I mean by parts of paradigms. And then over time, the paradigms are built up and they're revisited separately and then together. And then you're in the realm of less structured production activities. Okay. So in terms of vocab, I've mentioned a few bits of this, but there are some other things that need to be explained as part of the scheme of work. In year 7, in our 36 weeks of teaching, we are introducing new words in those 36 weeks. In year 8, in contrast, we're only introducing new words in 30 out of the 38 weeks to allow for the 2 assessment weeks, obviously, and then the 6 weeks of revising. So those are the fallow weeks that I pointed out on the scheme of work on the grammar tracking tab. That means that our average number of words is 10 to 12 new words in year 8 for each new vocabulary set. And that builds up over the 30 weeks to 300 to 360 new words that are going to be taught. So that's the size of the new vocabulary that pupils are going to be taught. They're obviously revisiting previous words the whole time, but that would be their vocabulary increase. If you were asked, okay, so how many words had pupils learnt in year 7? How many words have pupils learnt by the end of year 8? I think being able to say that and know that is an important thing that a scheme of work should be delivering. Really, it should be possible for us to know the answers to these questions. Which words we're choosing, what's guiding that vocabulary choice? Essentially the same principle as throughout the whole of Key Stage 3, and this would apply to Key Stage 2 as well. First and foremost, it's word frequency. We continue to select words that are largely within the 2,000 most frequent words in the language. That is because the most frequent words are the most often used words, so therefore the most useful words. And as a general principle, that holds throughout You might find words that you particularly like that you want to introduce, but in terms of the amount of time that a child has to invest in learning a word and retaining it in their long-term memory, we owe it to them really to make these words the most useful words that they could be. And frequency is what helps us to do that. We continue to build the verb lexicon. I've put continuing here because I've moved us on where I'm talking about the year 8, which is planned on exactly the same principles as year 7. So if you're brand new to NCELP and you didn't realize there was a year 7 scheme of work, they're both planned with the same principles in mind, and they both exist. But just as we set about learning lots of infinitive verbs in year 7, we continue to build up our number of infinitive verbs in year 8, because infinitive verbs, knowing them lexically, knowing what they mean and knowing their forms, is a precursor to be able to use them actively later. It's the first step into the grammatical side of it, which is obviously inflecting the verb. We also, in terms of our vocabulary sets, when we're building a vocabulary set for a week and saying which 12 words should we teach or which 10 words should we teach, we endeavor to select from different word classes so that we're not doing 9 nouns and 1 adjective, or we're not doing 10 nouns, for example. And this is because that then gives you the flexibility from the get-go, from the moment, to be building sentences from those new words, rather than a list of 10 nouns that just fill a slot after a verb. So, you know, je fais de la, and then 10 things that you can put after that, or je joue au, and 10 things that you can put after that. So not slot filling, but building up a broad selection of words. And at the same time, the words selected do support the grammar. So occasionally that interferes with our really, really mixed word class principle as well, because if we are teaching adjectival agreement, then out of our 12 words, we are likely to choose perhaps at least 6 that are adjectives, because we need to have a variety of adjectives to practice that new feature with. But in general, these are compatible principles that work really well together. And then I've talked a lot about the revisiting in the previous session, so I don't want to repeat myself too much, but systematic revisiting, a scheme of work has got to lay that out for you. Otherwise it's going to be too unmanageable at departmental level. And consistency across the board with all your teachers has got to be a goal of the scheme of work. You've all got to cohere and teach the same thing, because otherwise a teacher taking on a year 9 class has not got a clue what's really been taught to them in year 8. That's another really important justification for having a tightly planned scheme of work. We do pre-learning of the vocab and then revisiting using, we happen to use Quizlet, but there are other learning tools available. And the year 8 learning homeworks have built a little bit on the year 7 model and now include sort of a worksheet that goes with them, which integrates the revisited sets and also the new set together in sort of synonym tasks, antonym tasks, word association tasks, and word substitution activities. So just moving the progression on a little bit from year 7 and getting pupils to do activities that develop the depth of vocabulary knowledge a little bit more. The resources, I've mentioned this already, really carefully recycle the previously learned vocab. So that is one of the strengths that you get from planning something from scratch from day 1, is that you have control over the words that you're putting in. And then I should just mention the approach to words with multiple meanings, which I think is something that gets quite lost, and we just make that up as teachers. We make our own decision, or we look at what the textbook said. Does it list several meanings? But obviously a lot of the words we teach, particularly the high frequency words, are high frequency because they have lots of meanings attached to them, or more than one meaning attached to them. And we call those words with multiple meanings, or we call them polysemous words. And so an example in German, der Preis, means prize, but it also means price. Now, previously, I think the standard approach to that is just to list all of the meanings and just to learn the word once and then expect that pupils will be able to juggle those different meanings when they encounter those words. I think that's quite a big ask, and it does mean that quite a lot isn't known, quite a lot is not really nailed down. So what we've done with the NCELP scheme of work is to take a particular systematic approach to these words, and they are generally introduced with one meaning. And then when we want to add a second meaning, we reintroduce that word. So it's counted again, it's counted twice, it's added to a new vocabulary set, and it's listed with both its meanings. So its previously learnt meaning and its other meaning. And then that's obviously worked on in the lesson. Just acknowledging that words with multiple meanings need a bit of extra time, a bit of extra focus, a bit of extra noticing. And so we've got a system in the scheme of work for that. There is a whole tab called multiple meanings. The year 7 we call phonics. The year 8, which is phonics knowledge enhanced, the strand is called sounds of the language. And it includes a much greater diversity of elements. So we have things, and these are dependent on each language. So in French, for example, there's a lot of work in year 8 on liaison, which started in year 7, but there's more done with it in year 8. Syllabification and where the stress falls, that's also looked at in year 7. And then particularly in Spanish, the different syllables, the use of the tilde when it's needed, when it isn't needed, what it means about stress, when you'd have one, when you wouldn't have one, all of the rules around that, which I'm not sure I learned till I was at degree level, but those are made explicit and practiced in very, very accessible ways during year 8, and that's a really exciting bit of the strand, because I'm always excited when I encounter things that we're doing that I've never taught in that way before, and that is one of them. There continues to be a focus on the sound writing relationship in every lesson, and so we practice things. French introduces its new sounds, sound writing relationships, it develops liaison. Spanish focuses on word stress, as I mentioned. German combines its trickier pairs that have perhaps been presented in isolation in year 7. It combines those together for more practice. So we have slightly differing approaches as befits the different characteristics of the language. And also, there are these weeks that I flagged up on the scheme of work tab set aside for work on richer texts. There are actually, in the lessons generally developing on from year 7, there are texts of all kinds, non-fiction texts, fiction texts, literary texts included within the lessons generally and integrated into normal lesson sequences. And that's because it's the students' secure and growing high frequency vocabulary base together with their grammar and phonics knowledge that just means that they can understand these longer texts, including semi-adapted authentic texts. We check the readability of these texts using the word profiler. And I really would suggest that you join us next Friday when that is going to be launched, and it is going to be a free online tool. You've heard it here. Just imagine if you could feed a text into a word profiler that would tell you how many of those words, if you were following the NCELP scheme of work, how many of those words pupils had learnt before. It would give you a readability score. It would also be an editor so that you could tweak words. You could also choose top 2000 frequency to see how many of the words in your text were from the top 2000 most frequent words, and then tweak them to get your text within acceptable boundaries. It's an amazing tool. Anyway, it will be demoed next Friday at the NCELP session, which is when we're going to launch the word profiler. It's going to be absolutely free. It's going to be an online tool. It's one of the most exciting things that teachers, exam setters, textbook writers will be using in many years to come. It will give you a readability of any text that you feed into it. Okay, so I got excited there for a moment. So securing growing vocab means that they can understand these texts, so that's why we're including them more and more often. And yes, readability checked using the word profiler. And then these 2 assessment weeks that I said they were going to be, they're at the end of January and in the middle of June. They're designed not to overlap with the exact same weeks as the Year 7 ones, and they are designed to test the full range of knowledge that pupils should have, including Year 7 knowledge. So the first test that they do in January, which is an achievement test, so it takes a sample of phonics, vocabulary and grammar and tests those 3 strands across all of the modes and modalities. So across speaking, listening, reading and writing, phonics, vocab and grammar are tested, and it samples from all of their learning from the beginning of Year 7 up to the point in Year 8 in which they're tested. And then the same thing happens in June of Year 8, but obviously taking all of the knowledge, all of the previous knowledge into account. And the June assessments will also have a different type of assessment, which is called an applying your knowledge assessment. And the applying your knowledge will look a little bit more like typical assessments that teachers are used to. So recognizably listening, recognizably reading, recognizably writing, recognizably speaking. So more holistic, bringing, testing students' ability to bring their knowledge together and apply it in a fuller context. And that is happening at the end of Year 8 again. I would say that if you want to have a sense of just how the assessments work and how they're put together, again, I think the assessment strand of NCELP's work is really, really different. You know, some of it blew my mind when we first started working on these. If you want to have a really easy, quick road in, I would go to the Oak Academy website and search for the filmed assessment lessons, which work through 2 examples of each test type, so that you can see in a 20-minute video or so just the sorts of questions that and how they've been structured in order to get at the knowledge. If you've got a little bit more time, then you might want to access the screencasts on phonics testing, on vocabulary testing and on grammar testing. So these are just about the testing. Okay, I need to rush a tiny bit now. Resources tab is a really, really useful page that doesn't need very much explanation. It just gives you individual links to each resource. So it looks like this in Excel. If you click this link, it will take you to Year 8, Term 1.1, Week 1. And if you want to go to the Quizlet homework set, that will take you there. And if you want to go to the answer sheets for the homework, that will take you there. And there is something which I sadly haven't got time to talk about properly, but gaming grammar is what it says on the tin. It's an online game to practice grammar, and you can see there the sorts of grammar features that students can practice playing this game. It can be set for homework. It is open and freely available to all schools. You do have to email enquiries at NCELP, and then you need to have your school set up for it. So you'll just need a school code that's just for all of your teachers in your school. But then it is freely available, and it's safe, it's GDPR, all of that kind of stuff. Yes. Vocabulary list, again, really useful for any scheme of work to have this, I think, but I don't know many schemes of work that do. But it's a list in Excel of all of the words that are being introduced, the week in which they're being introduced, the frequency of those words, the parts of speech, so that at any given time you could tell people how many nouns you're introducing in Year 8, how many adjectives they'll know by the end of Year 7, those sorts of things that you can have your scheme of work tell you. the number of words in the top 2,000. So here you can see that in the German scheme of work, by the end of year 8, it's 92% of words that have been taught that are in the top 2,000. So you'll see that it's not 100%. There are words that need to come in there. You can see here Ferien, for example, has got a frequency ranking of 3,448 and nevertheless has made it into our list because it's considered one of those ones that we can allow ourselves and an important word. But in general, you can see that we keep it over 90% if we can. Finally, multiple senses. I have explained this tab already, but just to show you what it looks like, these are words that have more than one meaning. So you can see, for example, that you can't see the whole of it, but essentially where it says English 1, that's the first meaning that is introduced and the week in which it's introduced. To the right of that, you can see English 2 and the second meaning is added and you can see which week it's been introduced in. If it hasn't got a week next to it, it means the second meaning hasn't been introduced yet. But it's an ongoing tracking tab so that we can be sure that we know where all these words are and how many times students have seen them. Okay, so that was our walk through the scheme of work, and I'm really almost out of time, but it's fine because we've just got a very, very, very brief look, and it will be a brief look to encourage you to go and download this lesson. I think maybe download this presentation and share it with any colleagues that you're interested to share it with. So this is a lesson from year 8.
Maison, maison.
So if you were with me in the last session, you'll know that this is the presentation of phonics. I'm not going to be explaining all of the different things.
Maison.
I'll just show you what happened.
Maison, magasin, magasin, église, église, désolé, désolé, chose, chose, cuisine, cuisine.
Okay.
Maison, magasin, église, désolé, chose, cuisine.
Okay, this is a new SSC for year 8. It hasn't been introduced explicitly in year 7 because there were so many other ones to focus on. Obviously, a lot of the vowels were focused on. That was a 2-minute presentation phase. This is a listening task to focus on, is it hard S or soft S in French? We haven't got time to listen to it, but you can see, you can download it later. Okay. Then we're having a grammar introduction at this point. This means the vocabulary is coming after the grammar. Sometimes it does that. Often we do phonics, vocab, grammar, but it doesn't always have to be that way. These are all things they've seen before, and these are the new things that they're seeing. Okay, so this is recalling all of the adverbs that they've previously learnt in French. And we're looking at word order of adverbs. Okay. So here, this is the grammar input activities. We're using our knowledge of adverb placement to decide what's going on. So it's got to be le samedi because souvent would come after the verb. Some of these you'll have to actually download and read through all of the notes under the slides, but it will be really clear. If you're brand new to these resources, it will be very, very, very clear. This is a vocabulary activity. So vocabularies come after grammar now, and we're finding opposites. That means that all of these words here are known by students already in year 8. So they've been practiced more than once. Okay. Again, we're now doing a listening activity. Oh, I should probably have played that.
Je suis encore sur l'île.
Okay, and now they have to write that phrase down in English, focusing on the adverb meanings. And obviously a prompt to consider how they might do this in French. I wish I had more time to do this in more detail, but I do need to let you go very soon to another set. Well, it's probably the end of the day, isn't it? I'm sure somebody will come to shove me off my channel soon. Again, we've done, so here it's a reading activity. Look at the time phrases. How would we translate this into English? Does this need to be the simple or the continuous present? We've done a lot on this since year 7. It's probably been on the scheme of work about 8 or 9 times, because we never want to arrive at the scenario where students are presented with a picture and they want to say something like, il est dormir, he is sleeping. We don't want to get there, and because of that, we've been very explicit and done a lot of practice, which is the more important thing, about how the French present tense is translated into English, and looking particularly at where the time phrase goes. This is a speaking activity. Oh, what I wanted to do was show you where that ends up in the end, but I think I've cut that off. You will want to download that full resource. I obviously knew I was going to be slightly lacking for time at this point, but if you weren't in the previous presentation, they kind of come together as a package, although I bore in mind very much that people might just be coming to this one. You can't really get the full flavor of NCELP resources unless you download one and really look through it carefully. All the notes under the slides will begin to make things clearer than they do in a presentation like this, which can only be very partial and imperfect, I have to say. In terms of next steps, I would really encourage you to use the NCELP portal to explore the scheme of work collections. Pick a week and look at all of the resources. Watch the Oak Academy video that goes with that week, so that you've got a kind of example of somebody teaching it. That can be really useful and might be useful if you are a mentor in your school and training some other teachers. All of these activities could be really useful. Use one of the resources in your teaching, and maybe hit on a phonics one first of all, because they're easy to bolt on, or take an example of one of the vocabulary templates that I showed you in last lesson and build in some vocabulary revisiting activities. This is what the portal looks like if you want to go there. So put your search item in, which would be something like Year 7 French scheme of work. Or on the home page, you can click the button that says Explore Collections, and you can browse the collections with it, which is a little bit tedious at the moment, but you can, you have to go through a list, and there are lots of them, but you just need to be thinking through, okay, what do I want? Scheme of work, Spanish, Year 7, Term 1 full lessons, Term 2 full lessons. Find the one you want. Then scroll down to find the bit where it says download all, because there'll be about 36 different resources in each term, and then just click download all and wait while it does it. It shouldn't take too long, but it will be a whole big bunch of the whole of the term 1 resources, and it's a lot better to do it like that than download individual lessons and not know how they fit in. We have, to support the scheme of work, we have Year 7 language guides, which have all of the grammar and all of the vocabulary for the whole year in one printable guide, which is obviously online. You can put that to students for them to access as a virtual document rather than destroying the trees. If you are interested in finding out more about any of this, those are all the links that I would suggest you follow about the Year 7 scheme of work. Those are all the links that you could follow about the Year 8 scheme of work. Remember to go to the Oak Academy website and see some of these lessons being taught. And again, next steps, I would say, please come to the 20th. If I haven't tempted you by the exciting news of the multilingual profiler, please come and check that out. You can sign up even if you can't attend on the day. You can then listen back to those sessions, and there is a specific session assigned to the profiler, so you'll be able to pick that one out if you already know a lot about NCELP. Sign up for the mailing list. If you want to come to more sessions, Advent webinars are happening on the 5th of December and the 12th of December. Those are from me, all about culture and then all about meaningful practice. So 2 separate Saturdays. They're free, but I really would like to meet my £5,000 fundraising link, some fundraising project, which is to raise money for 64 orphans, amazing children, lovely people in Arequipa, Peru. I would like to meet my target of £5,000. So do consider, if you can, just even give me a couple of quid. That would be really useful. Look at, you can click those links, by the way, and it takes you to Eventbrite, and you can just do a very quick sign up for either of those. Look at the Oak Academy website, look at BBC Bite Size, you'll see some NCELP teachers on there, especially if you click this link, it will take you to those talking about grammar and phonics. And that's all, and I've gone over by a few minutes. I'm just going to click on the Q&A. Okay. So, is there a primary scheme that's recognised as having something approaching best practice? I was asked in the previous session, actually, if NCELP is going to work on primary. My answer is that I really hope so. I hope you can see that it isn't really a quick job working on this scheme of work. It's a small team that we've got, but we've been intensely focusing on this and on training teachers in this for 2 years now, and we will shortly have 2 years worth of resources. So if you can imagine, I know it's different with primary because you'd be doing shorter lessons and whatever, but it would still take that amount of planning to put into it. So yes, I very much hope so, but it's not going to be this year. And I think it's very hard unless you've got all of these principles in place, and unless you're putting this time in it, to just be able to say, yeah, well, that's nearly as good, or that's got all of the principles, because it can't really have unless it has, if you see what I mean. It's a difficult question to answer. Would NCELP consider providing adapted schemes of work to schools with fewer than 2 hours a week? We can't, because we haven't got the capacity. We're stretched to absolute limits to focus on our core remit, which is finishing the Key Stage 3 and going into Key Stage 4 schemes of work. Fewer than 2 hours a week. I tell you what, the closest thing to this that I've done is the Oak Academy Year 9 scheme of work, because to make that scheme of work fit for purpose, knowing that people will have had Year 10 classes where their students have come into Year 10 having had 5 months of lockdown, we knew there would be loads of gaps. We also knew that in Year 9, if you're trying to choose a scheme that's going to match people's books, well, people use all kinds of different books at Key Stage 3, so there wasn't really going to be anything that we could do there. So we came up with a scheme of work that essentially condensed the the most key bits of Year 7 and the most key bits of Year 8 NCELP schemes of work, and put them together in a 1-year intensive, but from start to finish, essentially, scheme of work. That means that if you spread that out, if you took that scheme of work, you can download that as a scheme of work from the Oak Academy site. It's called Year 9, but you'd be downloading it to obviously spread out across your 1 hour a week over Year 7, Year 8 and Year 9. That might be your easiest starting point. It wouldn't be perfect. You'd still need to be comparing various things, and you might think, oh, well, we can afford to have a couple of weeks extra practice on XYZ. But that, if you're finding it difficult to cut down NCELP scheme of work that's 2 hours a week to 1 hour a week, you might find it easier to start from the other way around and taking a condensed 1-year version and expanding that, if you like. So I can commend that to you. What do you think of 3 years GCSE? Okay, so I'm aware now that in 1 minute I'm definitely going to finish, because I will have gone over by quite a few minutes. What do I think of 3 years GCSE? I'm not sure. Well, what I think is that is that give me the length of my piece of string and I'll tell you that's one thing really. So at the moment, NCELP is having to assume that primary language teaching doesn't really happen, because in many areas of the country it doesn't really happen yet. We don't want to assume that, but that's the remit we've been given really, to focus on Key Stage 3 and go into 4. Now, if you told me that it really did start in year 3, I would be seeing this as a joined up 9-year program of study. I wouldn't be going, oh, that's GCSE for 3 years at the end. I would be seeing the whole thing as joined up. So when I'm my current scenario where I'm working with Key Stage 3 and Key Stage 4 and 5 years, I'm not really thinking of, I'm not even thinking about a particular division between Key Stage 3 and 4, and I'm certainly not thinking about how long my GCSE is. I'm thinking that what they learn in year 7, they will use in GCSE, and what they learn in year 8, they will use in GCSE, and what they learn in year 9, they will use in GCSE, and that we are, you know, we will, in year 11, we will be revising year 7, year 8, year 9, and year 10 vocabulary. All of it will get systematically revisited that many times. Because that's the way it works. It won't suddenly stop with a, okay, there's a line with Key Stage 3. Now we've got 2 years to do the GCSE. So it's a difficult question for me. It's not. I think if you ask me for now with schools and how they've set it up, I would say have a 2-year Key Stage 4 and a 3-year Key Stage 3. But mainly I'm saying that not about language. I'm saying that mostly because then there'll be fewer people who will opt out earlier. And I think opting out earlier is a terrible thing. I think, you know, if you haven't got a scenario where all of your students are doing a language, I would want all of them in for as much time as possible. So that would, for me, be the deciding factor in making it go to the end of year 9. But in terms of how you organize the learning, it shouldn't make any difference. And I kind of feel that you shouldn't be able to tell. I know that that's not necessarily the case with the current GCSE, but remember, there is a new GCSE coming in the pipeline. You can access through the NCELP website, yes. Go to the NCELP website, the portal, you just have to scroll down a little bit. There will be schemes of work for Key Stage 4. Thank you for that question. Yes, that comes after we finish year 9. Work on 10 and 11 will start. Key Stage 5 is not in our remit at the moment. I'm not saying it couldn't ever be, but it's not right now. And I think it's far more likely that there'd be an extension downwards rather than working upwards to Key Stage 5. That's just a speculation. At the moment, our remit is Key Stage 3 and 4. Conference on Fridays all day, but there are different sessions, so you can obviously register for all day, but we understand that some teachers are teaching and that they will need to go back and listen to those sessions afterwards. So next Friday's conference, just register and access whatever you can access. I think we start at 9:30. I think it probably goes till 3:30. Can I share these last few links here? Ooh, that's an amazing question. I don't know. I think maybe I can do chat, but you can't seem to get chat, so I don't know what happens if I try and do this. I feel like I could try. You can, oh, I don't know how you download the video, but that probably is possible. Oh, Shirley, hopefully we can karaoke soon. Yes. I really want to karaoke. I'm so desperate to karaoke. Right. Oh, there are lots and lots of questions here. Some of them I have answered about Key Stage 4. The Nadine's question, are the grammar things available to private tutors? Yes, they're available to anyone. I think, I mean, I know I said that we need a school code, but contact enquiries at NCELP, and tell them your situation. I think the idea is that it's a freely available tool. Yes, the word profiler is amazing, and please come on Friday and please hear about it. Do I have any videos of me teaching? Unfortunately, yes. Yeah, somewhere, but the ones that have good enough sound in them are embedded into the Pearson Key Stage 3 toolkit. I think there aren't any videos of me teaching NCELP because I haven't taught NCELP. I haven't had any Key Stage 3 teaching assigned to me since I started working on NCELP. I had Key Stage 4 only. NCELP work is beginning to tackle Italian, yes. Watch this space on that. I need to catch up with the teachers that are working on it. It's a couple of our lead schools that teach Italian. They are wanting to have a complete NCELP scheme of work for Italian. They're prepared to share the resources. I just need to find out how far they've got. The PowerPoint by email won't be a good idea. You can download it from the NCELP resource portal though. It will, if you go to news on the NCELP website, it will say Rachel Hawkes did a presentation at Language Show, and then it will give you a link to download the presentation, and that should be up by Monday, early next week anyway. Could the Year 7 scheme of work be broken up and delivered at Key Stage 2? Essentially, a version thereof, and that would be kind of where you'd start. Obviously with maybe some differences and even more consolidation phases built in. But Alistair, yes, given that we've started in Year 7 at the beginning, you'd be thinking, well, okay, so these words, but just thinking very carefully about the sort of context and the sort of activities that work really well in a primary classroom. But when I've been in and taught primary in the last year or so, not as a regular thing, but as a training thing, I have taken NCELP Year 7 resources and adapted them for 5 and 6. Absolutely, yeah. How do you sign up for the admin sessions? You need just to download this PowerPoint and then click on the links that say culture and cultural capital or making practice meaningful, and it will take you to Eventbrite. I will also tweet if you follow me on Twitter, or just do it for 5 minutes and then stop following me because I'm not that interesting on Twitter, but I will post the actual links to these Advent sessions in a moment. And this webinar, you can get this webinar for a month after the session on the same link that you've accessed it with today. That's Language Show that's hosting that webinar live for a month. The actual raw presentation slides that you might want, they're going to be on the NCELP portal. So you just need to Google NCELP and go to the news page. And from Monday, there'll be a bit that says Language Show presentations from Rachel. Here they are. And you'll be able to get those. Oh, Mandarin. I really would like to say yes to that. Lots of the principles apply to Mandarin. It's just a raft of work that we haven't been given a remit to do. We were given the remit to do French, German, Spanish, but I have our trust school. We have a trust school teaching Mandarin. I'm learning Mandarin. I really would love to get my teeth into designing some resources, but can't. Okay, I hope that I have answered everybody's questions. I imagine lots of people have gone now. If you need to contact me, remember that I have a website, rachelhawkes.com. You can email me through my website. I'm very happy to answer and point you in the directions of things. But hopefully from today, we know that we can get these presentations from the NCELP portal, and we can get the video. If you want the video of the webinar, you can get that from the same link that you used. I'm going to thank you very much and say goodbye. I hope lots of you are coming to sessions tomorrow. I'm going to be at the Show and Tell in the afternoon on Saturday, the one that is run every single year by Helen Myers, who most of you will know is ALL London, Association for Language Learning London. and Joe Dale. They co-host that session, and I have signed up for that one, and we'll see what else I can manage tomorrow. Okay, thank you all very much. I think we'll call it a day there. Hope you have a really good Friday evening, and all the best. Thank you very much. Okay, I have to work out how to get myself out of here. That's easier said than done, actually. Bye, everybody. Oh.